Session 103. Good evening. Our session may be somewhat briefer this evening, to make up for the unscheduled one. It is, of course, true that within our rather rigid schedule, we miss some excellent occasions for sessions. As far as Ruber is concerned, that is, we miss instances when his abilities are at high peak. Yet, overall, we balance out fairly well. And particularly in the beginning, such regularity is important. When a particular situation arises, or when his abilities are unusually attuned, we have in the past held unscheduled sessions, and I have always attempted to compensate by cutting the next one short, or cutting it out entirely. For reasons of convenience on your part, completely unscheduled sessions would not be practical. With your permission, we may attempt to take better advantage of such peaks of activity in the future. But if and when we do, we will still maintain a general practice of not holding more than 2 sessions a week. At some still rather far date, the present rigidity of our schedule may give way to a more spontaneous framework. Such a future framework and a method whereby we take fuller advantage of high peaks would also tend to cut down distortions. This would obviously be most valuable. This kind of procedure, while appearing less disciplined, would in actuality require added discipline, since this would be necessary to avoid the imbalance of either too many or too few sessions. If the procedure were attempted prematurely, it would also tend to place an added strain upon you both, particularly upon Ruber, who would have to make the decision in the last analysis. Also here, a word concerning wine in connection with sessions. It is a fact that alcohol is a depressant, that conscious inhibitions become lessened with indulgence of varying degrees. Ruber has not indulged to any degree, since, however, he has noticed that occasionally, without touching a drop of wine during a given session, he nevertheless feels as if he had been indulging. So I would like to make a brief explanation. It is quite simple. At certain stages, a state of dissociation is achieved with the indulgence of alcohol. This stage is reached by Ruber without such indulgence, and it is this state that he recognizes. Now, conceivably at times during a social evening, several glasses of wine under certain conditions, bringing him quite naturally to the same sort of state that he goes through and passes beyond in these sessions, could lead him to misinterpret his data or get his signals crossed. There is little real danger of this, but a state of dissociation is a state of dissociation, and this must be kept in mind. There is, however, a distinction here which he is already beginning to recognize. It is simply that he becomes vulnerable or more sensitive to inner data in a dissociated state, regardless of what causes the state to come about. This was true long before the sessions ever began, and it is generally true. In such a state, regardless of its cause, an individual is more sensitive to inner data. I am making this plain, naturally, for your own benefit. There is little danger here, except under the most unusual circumstances, merely an inconvenience or a feeling of disagreeability on your part. Actually, there is only a certain rather well-defined period within which the dissociation is conductive to our sessions. That is, while Ruber drinks socially to some quite limited extent really, the fine balance of dissociation that allows our sessions to begin would not be possible. If, for example, our Ruber drank more some evening than good sense would ordinarily permit, he has wondered about this. However, he does not have to worry ordinarily about beginning a session on the spur of the moment under the influence of too much drink. If he had truly done much, he simply would not be capable of a session, even if I were idiotic enough to agree to one. And I assure you that I would not be. I must tell you, however, that a session begun through mistake, so to speak, after a few drinks, would not suffer as far as the material itself were concerned. I mention the affair in general merely so that you can be alert to the possibilities and to aid Ruber in the development of his inner distinctions. In any state of dissociation, any individual is more sensitive to inner data. This sensitivity varies in accordance to the ability of the individual in general in this time, which is why I make the point. In an intimate gathering of close friends, if a few glasses of wine are drunk, and if Ruber happens to then be increasingly aware of inner data, there is not anything out of the way in holding a session, if this happens only occasionally. Indeed, a judicious use of wine is somewhat beneficial, but never to be overdone, and this is very important. Under circumstances of which I do not approve, I will not permit a session. My distinctions are not always the same sort as your own. However, there are certain social, peculiar niceties that are held in changing, shifting sometimes meaningless patterns to which I would not respond. That is, I simply would not be attuned myself to social situations or social transgressions, or what might seem social transgressions to you. So, in these purely superficial patterns of behavior, you and Ruber must judge. I mention here as example. Do you want your break? I mention here as example the evening when Ruber's father and his woman visited. You and Ruber had been drinking, but to no great extent more than usual. The woman, unfortunately, was not as restrained in her drinking habits. Now, Ruber was in a splendid state of dissociation. He was also emotionally and intuitively attuned because of his father's visit, and in an inner state of irritability, meaning excitability, which often accompanies dissociation. There is an outer aloofness, but an inner sensitivity to different stimuli. Ruber was more than ordinarily affected by the woman's inner plea for help with problems that she finds she is less and less able to cope. Ruber received that message, and in a conducive state was also in communication with me. I was perfectly willing to hold such a session. I knew your reluctance, but you see, I did not truly appreciate considerations that were strong with you, and as you recall, I did not come through. But this was in deference to you and Ruber personally. To me, the social entanglements and all possible social disagreeabilities did not exist. I would always catch any real possibility of danger. I would catch any occurrence that would be strongly disagreeable if it were actually going to occur. I would know beforehand, but I am not necessarily aware of what you might consider possibilities in that line. unless I use particular effort. So these possibilities are not considered by me. In the particular instance that we are discussing, if such a session would have led, if held, to a strongly unfortunate situation, then I would know in advance and not hold such a session. I will let you take your break. In such cases, therefore, you must make your own decisions, and you should not have a session if, for any reason, you do not feel comfortable about it. This applies to both of you. There must be an agreement on both of your parts, or the session will suffer. Dissociation opens or makes available lines and possibilities of communication. But there is no necessity that they be used at any given time or instance. Your feelings on the mentioned evening were legitimate as far as you and Ruber were concerned, even though those feelings, for many reasons, were not mine. This information should be used as guideposts in the future. Now, if, and this has occurred, Ruber finds his abilities unusually attuned, and the circumstances are advantageous, it is perfectly legitimate to hold a session, though it is not a scheduled one. I will automatically make adjustments. This refers to sessions with or without witnesses. Naturally, conditions being beneficial, such sessions may allow us to take advantage of high peaks of activity and increase our spontaneity. And with increased spontaneity, we will decrease any distortive effects. These effects very rarely occur, except in personal material, or in case where Ruber feels under pressure because of doubts. During high peaks of psychic activity, the doubts are minimized. I am aware of your resumed psychological time experiments. This will not be a long session. The effect seen that evening was legitimate, and I will discuss it at a later date. There will indeed be a welcome sale on Ruber's part. He unfortunately blanks me at this moment as to details. The increased appearance of his ability creatively, as seen in his own writing, should be apparent to you, Joseph, and is objectively apparent in the letters he has received. The increased focus of his abilities I predicted during an unscheduled session, if you recall. These short stories, dating approximately from that time, display a much increased facility and knowledge. The poetry is also steadily improving, and this inner increased spontaneity. That are the results directly of intuitional powers are flowing over even into his paintings, allowing him to use knowledge that had not been previously available to him. Such results are also now showing in your own work. The understanding and inner freedom is enabling you to use more and more facets of your own ability, and to develop this further. In quite practical terms, also, you have been selling paintings, because now you do not hold back, and you will continue to improve, and this improvement will cause others to be drawn to your work. I told you a while ago that what seemed impractical was practical, and that value fulfillment is the only true practicality. I will here close the session. We are doing well. Nevertheless, I want to make sure that our precious balance in terms of energy involved and so forth is maintained. Though I am in fine form and per usual could carry on for hours, I would suggest when it is convenient that your recorder be repaired and that it be kept in a handy place in this room,
set up for recording for any occasions when I could speak less formally. That is also quicker, conversationally, without the need of you taking notes. This would not happen very frequently, since in the long run, it involves just as much work on your part in than transcribing from the machine. My best regards to you both. I am in the mood for vocabulary, but I will stick to my word like a gob of glue. Good evening to you both. Rob said, "Good night, Seth."